The Center for Educational Media and the College of Education at Middle Tennessee State University are proud to offer professional development to K-12 educators in Tennessee through our online video library. The following video is presented by the Center for Educational Media in partnership with Professional Educators of Tennessee's Leader U Conference. For more professional development videos, check out our website at cem.mtsu.edu.
Good afternoon. My name is Megan Benton, and I am on the board here for ProEd Tennessee. And today we have with us Fran Hoogstraat, and she's going to be talking to us about the importance of PE and physical fitness on learning. A little bit about Fran. She's invested a lifetime of learning and coaching in the throwing events of track and field for all ages for Franklin Road Academy, and for high school athletes across Middle Tennessee. She earned her master's and doctoral degrees in higher education administration with a specialty in intercollegiate athletics from Vanderbilt University, while working as an academic and athletic counselor and throws coach for Vanderbilt track and field. One of her recent joys involved a 4.5-year legislative journey to assist the Tennessee Association of Health, Physical Education, Recreation, and Dance in a unanimous passage of the Tom Cronin Physical Education Act. And Fran credits her learning in track and field to all of those who have coached her in the past. So join me in giving her a warm welcome.
Well, it's so good to see everybody. And thanks for coming over a little closer, although I can turn my head, so it's not a problem. I'm really looking forward to this. I was thinking about how I never really had much physical education growing up, but when I was 10, my older brother started training me in track and field, and guess what? He was a physical education teacher. So after 26 years of coaching, the kids that I coach, college, and now I'm at a high school, Franklin Road Academy, they say, we feel like we're in science class. And I say, you are. You're learning your body, you're learning the biomechanics of this sport. And so I've got a notebook and I pull it out and show them which muscle groups are doing which things. And once they know that, it's so much easier. That's a lot easier as a coach than for me to just say to them, I want you to throw further. Well, how? And once they know all of those pieces, and that's physical education's contribution, but it's a whole lot more than that also. So this topic, we're talking about the whole child and the importance of educating the whole child. And I'm so thankful I'm a musician also. So whatever energy I didn't spend on throwing, I spend at the piano. And it's amazing how many emotions I can work out at a keyboard and how many problems I can solve sitting down with a piece of music that's difficult or one that I know really well. And all of those things that I've had, we all share this. We want that for children today too. And it should never be, okay, you can only be in track, nothing else, no music, no anything else. No, it all fits. And there are many administrators don't believe that they all fit, but they can fit. So that's the good news about today. And I'm just curious with this group we have here today, how many of you had physical education growing up? Okay, most of you. And how many days a week? Just yell out a number.
3-ish. It alternated. It was 2 like one week and then 3 the next. I would switch.
Yeah, we had 5.
5. Awesome. Anybody else? Okay, well, 5 is ideal. And Shape America, that is their recommendation. How we've gotten to this situation in our schools now is that maybe there were 1 or 2 physical education teachers that were not stellar. And maybe they just rolled out soccer balls or basketballs and there was no instruction. And it only takes sometimes a few people like that. Administrators get an idea of anybody can do this and it's not important. We can leave that for after school. Well, that brings us to an important point. For our state, Tennessee now leads the nation in childhood obesity. And that is something we all have to be concerned about. We were number 3, and you know the joke, which I've learned not growing up here, that if you pull ahead of Mississippi and Alabama in a bad way, you really have problems. So for those listeners that are from those states, I'm sorry, but they're ahead of us now in terms of addressing the needs of children. That is of great concern. Nashville is spoken of now as the IT city. Awesome. But when it comes to childhood obesity, we're not the IT city in that, except in a bad way, and the whole state. And there are counties way worse than Davidson County. So just a really good quote from a principal in Indianapolis. In order to get the best out of students, we have to educate the whole child, which means we have to take into account their physical health, their mental health, as well as their ability to read and do math. Well, of course. The person introducing me mentioned the legislation we passed, which they're trying to undo. It's a couple of House members trying to undo it. It's rather mysterious. And the question came to me, so you don't care about academic subjects? We all care about academic subjects, and physical education's one of them. In fact, you could argue it's the foundation. If you think in a circular form and you have a pie, physical education is right in the middle. If you're thinking about a house, it's the foundation. And that's pretty important. It boosts everything else. And I think that's exciting. Now I'm in a different role as a private coach and a school coach. So I've done some substituting, and it is awesome. And I had no idea what children were like before physical education and after physical education, middle school. Wow. When they would come back from physical education, I think we could have taught them the whole periodic table and they'd have had it. I mean, they're so sharp and so enthusiastic. Well, we want that for all of our students. We'll talk in a little while about a school in Naperville, Illinois, that in high school they recommend that physical education take place for students before their most difficult classes. So if yours is chemistry, your physical education should take place before that. You'll do better, learn more. If yours is math, then you should have physical education before your math class. And it really makes sense, and they've seen big jumps academically. There's a lot to talk about. So I really like this, though. Physical education is dealing with the whole child. I have friends in my age group, and maybe you do too, who will say, well, I'm not going to work out, I'm not athletic. That has nothing to do with it. Everybody has a body. God gave us these marvelous bodies, and it's mind, soul, and spirit. When you work the mind, let's say some of you teachers preparing lessons, the best thing you can do after that is go walk or run or swim or something like that, and then come back and finish whatever you're doing. Mind and body, spirit and soul is in there too. Okay, so we've established that we're working with the whole child. We want to boost the whole child. But guess what? And this is not a surprise to anyone. Inactivity has now replaced smoking as the #1 cause of death in our country. Our ancestors 100 years ago would have never believed we'd get to a place like this where they did so much physical work. Those of you who've grown up on farms we did a lot of physical work, and it was 6 days a week, not a problem. So this is a concern. And by the way, for you when you're in your offices or preparing lessons and you're working, every 45 minutes you should stand and do something. Every 45 minutes, or 30 is even better. But now sitting has become the equivalent of smoking. So people who are sitting all the time are working against their health every single day, all of us. And sometimes I get going on a project and I need a block of time, and then I think, man, you gotta get up and move something. Go chase your cat, go run around the house, something, get on your bike. even for 5 minutes. So these are some good applications. But without the intervention, because of this inactivity, the Center for Disease Control and the American Heart Association have predicted that this generation of children will not outlive their parents. Well, let's think about that a minute. First of all, that is tragic. And what's going to happen if that takes place? So we're at that stage right now. And I mentioned how we lead the nation in childhood obesity. In other words, we're number one with the highest statistics. Depending on the county, it could be anywhere from 38% to 55%. That's pretty high. It kind of blows your mind, really high. Now there are places, there's little pockets in our state, super healthy. Some schools, super healthy. But statewide, that's the average. Adult obesity, we're number 3. Okay, so let's talk about a little bit first about the value of physical education and what it can do. It's not to be taught by just anybody. I don't have a physical education degree. I couldn't teach it. I'd have to go get a whole bunch of coursework to be able to do it. Sure, just like math or chemistry or something like that. But when you have a licensed teacher who is endorsed, that was their major, they're already endorsed to teach it, and then there's usually a certification process, and that's good too, but the endorsement is the most important thing for physical education. So if you're an elementary reading teacher, that should never be your responsibility to teach physical education. It's not fair to you. And then you have to go meet with a physical education teacher to figure out how to do it. That's not what you went to school for, maybe. So it is important that it be somebody that has done all the coursework and curriculum and knows all of the skills to be able to teach those skills. When I was preparing for this, I was really blown away by how many things are involved in physical education. I put them on slides for you. So some teachers, some administrators, not too many parents, some administrators want physical activity only. So it's important to know the difference between the two, and they are very different. I even came up with a little design to help us understand that. We'll get to that in a minute. But think of it this way. If you were building a house, physical education is the foundation of the house. And probably everybody in here knows what happens if you've ever moved into a house with a faulty foundation. Sooner or later, you're going to have really big problems. It's coming. Well, you can't just start at physical activity. That's like the second level of the house. You got to have a really good foundation. That's where physical education comes in. And it sets a child up for all the rest of their life. Now, as a track and field coach, I can always tell when we get new students who've transferred from maybe another school, I can always tell who hasn't had very much physical education, because they don't really know their upper body from their lower body, you know. You ask them to march, they don't understand opposition. And these are not criticisms, but those things were supposed to be learned in elementary physical education. So physical activity is not sufficient. That's the rest of your life. I'll go back to an earlier example. Because I had a brother that was a physical education teacher, I owe most of my coaching career to him. He taught me through the concepts of physical education. And so I'm still drawing on all of that because I learned through fundamentals. And now we have a generation of coaches that get trapped into thinking, I'll just watch a few videos and I can teach my kids how to throw the shot or discus. And they're so limited. They're so limited in what they can do. And there's awesome videos, but I just love the look on an athlete's face when I explain the reasons why we're doing this. And when they know why, and why their throw starts at the feet and works up the body, you can see the lights come on. And it applies to every sport thanks to biomechanics. And it's so fun to teach it that way. They come away with much better knowledge of a whole lot of things. And my school has decathletes. Those are amazing athletes. They do 5 field events and 5 running events. Well, those same principles apply to all of their field events. And once they know that, not only are they a better athlete, they're a better problem solver. In case they're separated from their coach, they know how to fix technical things in their throwing. It is so fun. So the behaviors of active living, physical fitness, sportsmanship, motor skills, those are some of the big topics in physical education. And happily we can report it's now considered an academic subject. If you remember the No Child Left Behind authorization under the Bush administration, this is a updated version of that, even better. ESSA, Every Student Succeeds. And it's looking at, finally, a well-rounded education. Everything should be included. The school day doesn't have to be extended. It all fits. That goes back to 2015, and it was signed by President Obama. Now, I have to admit, in putting this together, I had to really think now, what are the specific building blocks of physical education? And I thought it was important enough to take up 6 slides. I was kind of blown away. And before we get into those, I wanted to tell you that we, in the legislative work that I've gotten to do, it's been very interesting. One of the legislators I spoke with thought this could all be done in 1 day a week of 60 minutes. How many of you are elementary teachers? Middle school? Okay, high school. Okay, good. Oh, a nice mix. Well, did you know, you probably all know this, I was a speech major, so I'm just learning these things, but a child's age is the same as their attention span. So if they're 6, you get 6 minutes. Well, an hour of PE is not necessary all in 1 day for an elementary student. 2 days of 30, you can get a lot done in 30 minutes. Elementary teachers, am I right about that? Because they're just moving and they're wired differently and they just move at a way different rate. So this one legislator thought 60 minutes 1 day a week would be sufficient. We get all these things done. Well, not very well, and at a very low quality, if any quality at all. So let's look at what some of these building blocks are. And I want you to, the fun way to do this is, there's probably some of you that played some sports, yes? Shout them out for me.
Basketball.
Basketball?
Volleyball.
Volleyball?
Football, wrestling.
Okay.
Softball.
Softball? Anything else?
Tennis.
Tennis.
Ultimate frisbee.
Ultimate frisbee. A newer sport.
Swim team.
Swimming, yes, swim team. Anything else? Okay, well think about those sports. If you didn't play any of those sports, think about the ones you've heard or some that you like watching or some that you wished you could learn or whatever the case would be. And I think you'll see across these 6 slides how all of these things prepare you not just for sport, but for doing these activities across a lifetime. And if children don't get them, guess what? Inactive children make inactive adults. So I'm talking to people that know this very well. You have this window of elementary school to get a lot of foundational things in them. And then middle school to develop it more. But by the time they get to high school, if they're missing those things, well, the boat's moving fast. Now we got to get into chemistry and physics and geometry and algebra 2 and on and on and on, calculus. So things get left behind, and that is what is so sad. So let's look at these. It's pretty neat. So hopping on 1 foot, galloping, sliding, skipping, jog, run, jump and land for distance, jump and land for height. Dance is one huge category all by itself. Balance, weight transfer, and rolling. Combinations of weight transfer and rolling, underhand throw, overhand throw, catching, passing and receiving with implements or hands, dribbling with hands, dribbling with feet, kicking, force or distance, passing and receiving with feet, striking with hands, striking with a short implement, striking with a long implement, jumping rope, space awareness location, space awareness pathways, level, directions, effort, speed and force, relationships, body shapes with objects, with people, movement principles, base of support, muscle tension, ready position, performance cues, simple strategies, health-related fitness, physical activity, personal responsibility, feedback, working with others, procedures and rules, safety, appreciation, and challenge. And what's really neat, probably in each of your subject areas, you have national standards that you adhere to. And you cannot teach a 5th grade level to the kindergartners. It would be ridiculous. So those standards in every subject also exist in physical education. That's what's special. So if I'm a kindergartner and I start in physical education, I am not compared to any of you if we're all kindergarten students. I am compared to my own growth, and maybe it's that way in your subject areas. So if I start out at a certain level, I am measured based on how I improve. Now, did any of you ever have physical education where you felt left out, not chosen, something like that? It's not fun. And there's people that I know, when I bring up the 2 words, physical education, they say, I hated it. I never was picked for a team. I never, in the presidential physical fitness challenge when I was growing up, I could never do the flexed arm hang. Although, this is funny, I grew up on a farm and I bent many things trying, you know. I could do a pull-up, but I couldn't just hang there. So I never got that certificate. Well, now, I don't think that exists at all in the same way. Now, it looks at where I started and where I improve to. Well, that's completely different, because now, if you weren't picked, well, you're competing with yourself now. And you know that fun feeling of thinking, I can get better at this. Self-motivation. Well, that's all positive, and it's such a good life lesson, because so many things we do in life are like that. With my athletes, sometimes we go to a track meet and there's people that are really good, and I see this look on their face, they start to get kind of pale or really nervous. And I say to them, you're not competing against them. You're competing with them. And they go, oh. I say, you're here to improve you. If you've thrown 52 in the shot, you want to at least do that. But let's see if we can get you over 54 today. Oh, and then the person that's throwing 65, let them go. They're trying to throw 70. You just happen to be in the same place with them. But feed off of them. Let what they're doing fire you up. And I love mental toughness too. I've gotten to go to some things at the Olympic Training Center in San Diego. And the sports psychologist would say, if you can do it, I can do it. So if you do something awesome, that shouldn't be a threat. I should go, okay, I can do it too. She's doing it. And we got to go and take a surf lesson this spring. It's not my sport. I see that now. It was fun though. But you know, when a instructor says to you, you have a lot of heart, you know you're not getting it, you know. I probably needed the first surfing lesson about 35 years ago, but it still was fun. But it's the concept of, in so many of these things, self-improvement. And isn't that really what school's about too? Self-improvement. And I always have had trouble working fast. And in school, when we had standardized tests that were timed, it was the most stressful thing ever, because I could never keep up. And by the time I got to Vanderbilt was coaching, new coaches would finish their tests fast. I And I'd coached for 10 years and I'm still on the first page. It's really sobering. Well, there's computer tests for people like me. They put me in an office and I can work at my own speed. And I'll do fine. But now a lot of those things are built in to physical education. So that it's not that everybody's awesome, because that's not true, but how are you doing compared to where you started? Physical education is focused on that now. So that is all good news. Now, we wanted to talk about physical education and then how it relates to fitness as well as physical activity. We talked about that earlier. There are people that think that's sufficient. That if I'm a third grade math teacher, that I see that it's maybe hot in the room, they're tired, it's the day before vacation, they don't want to listen, I got to do something. I'm going to have them jump up and down. Well, that's all positive, but that is not what we're talking about in physical education. So hopefully this will arm you with some tools in case you have administrators that want to go in that direction to understand why that may not be sufficient. Okay, so you may know about this program in Naperville High School, the two of you that are at the high school level. They started to look at what can we do better in physical education. And Illinois is leading the nation right now, and I have a friend who's a physical educator in Waterloo, Barb Borger. She's retired now, but her classes were so popular when they went to this model. They were always popular because she was so into what she was doing, and it was instructional physical education. They had units just like you have in your subject classes, and kids loved it. They learned, they really performed. But the schools in Illinois have gone to this model where they're taking the concepts of physical education and making it fitness oriented at the high school level. Now, it doesn't apply to most of you because you're at middle school and elementary school, but for those of you at high school, it's fun to think about fitness. And it's related to this second point here, that, in other words, that the goal isn't, okay, how many free throws can you make? Although that's a good thing. You should see the statistics sometime of how many thousand free throws Michael Jordan didn't make in order to make all the ones he did make. Kind of blows your mind. Gives you a different view on losing, because the numbers look like he was a loser. And I don't think anybody thinks of Michael Jordan that way. So this second point here, this is pretty interesting. After age 26, only 5% of the US population is in a sport. Now, I thought it'd be fun to be in masters swimming. Haven't done it, but that would be an example. But although sports are important, and I am a sport coach, the fitness skills, that's appropriate for a lifetime. Now, you play some pickup basketball once in a while?
I try.
Yeah. So that fits, and you still look like you could do it too.
I wouldn't know where to find a team sport at my age now, to be honest. It's not a thing.
Yeah. You'd have to start it.
Right.
You'd have to start it. It'd be more practical for you to teach it.
Right.
You know, I took a class in graduate school at the University of Iowa, and they had this is pretty interesting. They had a different notion of a women's softball league. There was no scores kept. But if, in the denim jacket, if you were hitting, and I'm in the outfield, and I caught it, well, that was a victory for the two of us, because I wouldn't have had anything to catch if you hadn't hit that. So they tried to come up with different notions of sport to make it work. It's pretty neat. You're still going to have to start what you want to do.
Yeah, I have a friend who started a roller skating club in Chattanooga just because she wanted to go roller skate, and now they're doing outdoor roller skating all through the town, downtown Chattanooga.
And that'd be a fun place to do it too.
Right.
Crossing bridges and
Oh, absolutely.
oh, really good. So maybe what you'll come away with are some nice byproducts today where you go home and think, I'm going to start some stuff. and that's good too. Also, by the way, there are masters athletics in sports, and no one should be offended. Senior Olympics is down the road. but there are those things. But what Naperville found is that fitness was more appropriate. For me, I do swim laps, I'll do it today, but running, swimming laps, different kinds of things. It could be tennis, but things you could do by yourself. And that fits, and so many corporations have little workout rooms, hotels have them, on and on. So Naperville figured out, you know what? If we're preparing young people for adult lives, we gotta get fitness involved in here. And you look like you could run a good mile, correct? So that would be an example. We put him on we have him do some cross training, not just running, but we put him on the bike. We put him in the pool with an aqua jogger, and then we put him back on the track and we say, hey, what's your mile time like? So that's the kind of things they did, heart rate monitors. But it's a completely different notion. But still, those are high school children that understood physical education. That's why it's worked so well there. So it's fun to think about the application of physical education to fitness. It seems so obvious. But the basics you'd had to have learned at an earlier age to be able to do that. Physical education and physical activity. I found this, it's a fan. The spokes of the fan is to be symbolic of the foundation of physical education. So if you've ever used the fan, you can't work with just this part. It's not possible. There's no fan. So that is it's a nice graphic, hopefully, explanation of why you've got to have the foundational pieces to be able to have a lifetime of physical activity. And so if you just start with physical activity, it doesn't go anywhere. It is so limited. And I've had the fun, maybe some of you have too, where you've had a child in your class and they found things, extracurricular things they were excited about. All of a sudden they're doing better in school. And maybe your children have been like that. It's pretty awesome. That's what's possible when they get these basics. The myth that them doing better in their sport means they're going to do worse in the classroom, that's not really accurate. At the college level, the better they do in their sport, the better they do in the classroom, because they value what they're getting in their sport. I was afraid to go to college, but because of throwing and track and field, well, I wanted to do that for 4 more years. So I knew I had to do well in school. It kept me going until I figured out what I was good at, what I liked doing. So they really support each other far more than people realize or than we talk about. Now, do we have anybody that was a college athlete in here? High school athlete, you guys were. Yeah. And maybe you felt the same way. It's not 100% across the board, but they really do support each other very well. And this is the image I came up with about when I asked the question, how could physical activity be enough for children? It's not. And by the way, I encourage all of you to use brain breaks. We might do one in the middle here, in the middle of our session. Because it is good to get up and move. And the teachers, do you remember that the teachers that have their children move around the classroom and walk in the hallways, or if it's snowing or raining and they can't go outside, they come up with something and have them do it in the class. That is always awesome. It's just insufficient for that child. That's not the only thing. Recess is important. Going out and playing, it is important. Where I grew up, I went to a one-room country school, so I didn't have that experience of a city school at all, but we always went outside. You just, you put on the proper clothes and you could have a snowball fight. There's always something to do. But I really like this. So in your case, our pickup basketball teacher, well, he's still doing that. But physical activity is kind of in the middle. And the basis of that is physical education. Okay, and we talked about this earlier. Have you ever been the teacher before or after? the children go to physical education class. At my school, it's awesome. Private school, they have it 5 days a week. And I'd never seen anything like this. I come and I was in another part of the building, and I come and I see them all in a line getting ready to go to physical education. You'd have thought they'd all won the lottery. They were so ramped up for PE. I thought that has to be fun for the teacher when they get students like that. Now maybe you have them come to you like that, and that's awesome. But they do, if they have physical education, then they come to you, they're going to still be like that. And pretty neat. So now we're getting into what the topic was supposed to be about physical education and learning. Now, I mentioned a couple legislators that wanted to do 60 minutes once a week, elementary physical education. Well, if their attention span's 6 minutes, if they're, or 7 or 8, and it's only once a week and they're little, aren't you starting over every week? Well, I would be with kids that I'm coaching. You need them more than that. So the distributed practice time is important. If you're always starting over, where do you get to? You're kind of just in a circular pattern. So the model of what we have a lot of times in our schools is 60-minute class periods. Well, that's barely suitable for high school, let alone elementary. Now, some of your schools are elementary teachers. What are your time periods of class? Are they 30?
The duration of the elementary?
Yeah. 50.
50?
I'm pre-K, so we don't go, but I think everyone else goes for about 40 or 45, pre-K through 1 school.
Well, one of the complaints to us was, you can't do anything in 30 minutes. You can. Physical education teachers get a lot done in a 30-minute class period. And if I'm trying to improve at something and I could be twice 2 days a week, I'd learn a lot faster and it would be reinforced a lot better that way. So there's no evidence, this I thought was very interesting, that additional time sitting in a classroom is going to improve test scores. And that's something there are people in our state who think, well, we're just going to go to 90-minute periods, block scheduling. Well, what about how a child learns? I don't think an adult could do that, let alone a child. So there's no evidence that additional time in academic classes is really going to help them. It kind of is the opposite. If you had shorter class periods and more of them, you could do more. They'd get more out of it. But when children have physical education, they increase their fitness, they increase their academic performance, they're more apt to be at school. They've got things to look forward to. Better attendance, they exhibit better behavior in school and in class. Some of you may have heard of this book, Dr. John Ratey, Harvard Medical School. And it's somewhat controversial. The book, the name of it is The Revolutionary New Science of Exercise and the Brain. And he's gotten lots of attention. It's part of what has, no pun intended, sparked the physical activity movement. And he talks about what's going on in the brain. I couldn't find any good diagrams, but if you could picture, I know if you're teachers, you have imagination. If you can picture the brain, and if you take a break and have exercise, twice as much of the brain is activated. Well, that is a great way to learn. And how many times have you worked on a project, we talked about this earlier, where if you did something where you're physically active, you come back and you go, I have the solution to my problem. I know what I'm going to do. Because the mind and body connection. But this is what Dr. Ratey said. Exercise is like fertilizer for the brain. It's so good. It's like Miracle Grow. So that's a pretty good quote right there. Now, another one he says, they kind of have to let this sink in a little bit. exercise builds brain cells, not new learning. Wow, that is pretty deep. Because as you get older, you're losing brain cells. Wow, this makes me pretty excited about swimming laps today. I'm going to be building brain cells at the same time aging was causing me to lose them. Oh, I might just balance out. Awesome. I won't have to retire. I just keep going. So I wanted you to see that too. Exercise builds brain cells, not new learning. What I do like about Dr. Ratty is that he's looking at things from a medical and neurological standpoint. And he travels all over the country now talking about physical activity for all ages. So that's something to think about too. If you need some summer reading, you have nothing to do this summer, this would be a very interesting book to get you thinking. The next quote that I've got is, it's from Naperville, yes, about a quality physical education program. So if ever, this is how it might apply to you. Let's say that you get put on a search committee at your school. They're going to redo physical education. And they had to have somebody not from physical education on a search committee. And you think, why did they pick me? I have so much to do. Well, this is something to think about. If you're looking at, or as a parent, what should a quality physical education class be? Well, according to Naperville, and this is the Paul Zintarski, the physical education teacher that travels really around the world now, introducing this in Asia and Europe, everywhere. They're all interested because guess what? The obesity problem is not just in our country. It's really all over the world now. Very strange for some of the same reasons. And he said that once this started to really show up, the learning and the achievement of the students in Naperville High School kind of skyrocketed in every subject. He said it just, administrators couldn't believe it. And they kept testing to see, is this accurate? Yeah, every year it was the same. Kids were really achieving at a higher level, more excited about learning and things that are going to help them the whole rest of their life. I think that's important. So a good physical education program should be engaging. He used an example. I thought this was rather funny. Some high schools have a 1 physical education credit. What does yours have?
It's a half a credit.
Half a credit. What about yours?
We're a charter school with an outdoor theme, and as a result, after 4 years, they get one full physical education credit, so a quarter of a credit a year.
See, that's good though. They're engaged a little bit each year. Really good. You get a lot more done, I'll bet. That's pretty neat. So it should be engaging. This school in Florida that he mentioned has the 1, yours is half credit. Theirs is a 1 credit, and you can do it online. Am I the only one that sees a problem with that? I mean, this is like goofy. Online physical education.
So like give you an assignment, then you go outside and run around for an hour, come back in and write about it? Or like I can't wrap my brain around that.
No insult to Florida, but there was a place that had that one, So once again, inactivity, going backwards, not forwards. So fitness-based and strategically placed in the course of the day. This is what Naperville said. So depending, like we talked earlier, if you had a problem class, I struggled in math. Okay, well my physical fitness class or physical education should be before math. And I'll come to math with a more fresh mind. I'll probably do better, maybe grasp it even better, should be. And that that should be the most important part of a child's day. And then this is important too, not just because physical education is important, but because that child is important. And don't we want to set them up to be successful? I have children all around me where I live. And there's one little girl that she's on my radar as being at risk. As a little 2nd and 3rd grader, she was very enthusiastic about everything. And now in middle school, I notice She's heavier. She's not as active. And I don't see the joy in this girl anymore. And it's kind of heartbreaking because that's what this is all talking about. And there's many factors. We all know that. But we want to see, we want children like that in your classroom that are excited about learning, because they're going to have you, and when you're done with them, they'll go to the next teacher excited. And that excitement should continue all the way through on into their adult life, or what are we doing, you know? And I'm sure all of you became teachers because you had some special teachers and you saw the difference that made. So that's important. And I like the final part of this. Our children deserve to be healthier and to achieve their academic potential. There's a lot of offshoots of this. For me, when I'm swimming regularly, wow, I'm eating better because my body's craving healthier things. I bet you notice it in your students. You get them outside, and all of a sudden they start to really value that. They take better care of their bodies. They want to know, what should I be eating? Most do. Our track kids, they come to me a lot of times. I always have healthy snacks with me because, well, you know, their brains aren't totally developed. So they come to practice, they haven't eaten properly, and I don't want anything to happen to them. So I give them a healthy protein bar that I use or something like that. Sometimes I have fresh fruit, different things, because that's my way of helping them understand better nutrition. If they know not to ask me for Doritos, I don't have them. I want to put healthy things in their hands so that they're thinking, hey, this works, I feel pretty good. I remember one boy I coached, he was 19. He'd never been willing to eat a peach. So he bites into it and he goes, hey, there's something in the middle. Peach pit. He'd never had a peach. I couldn't believe it. That's sad.
I brought a veggie tray to a Boy Scout meeting one time, and this one kid had never had broccoli before. And he was like, I don't know what these little trees are, but they're wonderful. And he was like 10, like old enough that he probably should have had broccoli at some point in his life. Never had or seen broccoli. Didn't know the word.
Yeah. You opened his mind and his mouth. Well, that's the best part. Yeah. They don't know what they're missing. And to me, that's one of the many fun things about educating and coaching is we have that opportunity to, you know, open their minds to their inner reality, but what could their future reality be? You're using the outdoors. I think that's awesome. But there's so many tools. We've got a window of opportunity to give them. Rethinking why physical education must be central to children's curriculum. And a few quotes. Principals who thought physical education was a frill and took it out of the school curriculum are now rethinking that. And then she says, I can't sit for 7 hours a day. Why would we expect a 5-year-old to be able to sit for 5 hours? That is such a good point. And so sometimes, you know, the pendulum swings one way. Well, we got to get it to swing back the other way so that kids have a chance at an adult life and, you know, and to really enjoy it. And then this one from a book that I've not read. I saw it on this particular video, Educating the Student Body. Now there's a high correlation between a child's physical fitness and their performance on standardized tests. Now it's not about testing, but it's a good comment on academic achievement. It might show up in testing. I'm one, for graduate school, I took the standardized test, got a score, studied extensively, took it again, did worse. That's not supposed to happen. But, you know, that's me. So if the measure of me was standardized scores, I wouldn't even have a score. But achievement, ability to learn, ability to grow. And this is a special quote. This particular individual, if you ever need a speaker at your school, she would be phenomenal. This is the elementary physical education textbook they use in the universities in our country. She's one of the co-authors. It's in its 10th edition. So she has a child development background, elementary education, and she is special. She's in Oak Ridge, and she's doing consulting right now in the New York City school districts. So she was a national president of what now we know as Shape America. She helped develop the national standards for physical education in our country. And Tennessee's are slightly different, but you never know who's going to grow up where. And she is a gem right here in our state. When an adult is being wheeled into surgery to have their feet amputated due to diabetes, I'm pretty sure, or pretty certain, they are less concerned with their school test scores and far more concerned with why they neglected their health. We probably all know somebody who's had that happen. And one of the reasons I was so excited about doing something like this is that childhood diabetes is growing. How is that possible? You know, children having strokes, it's happening. And that is so sad. And there's all of the medical problems adults have, almost all of them are starting to show up now in children. And this is fixable. This is fixable. But this is where we all come together. And when the related arts teachers, do we have anybody in related arts, music or band? What is art? Awesome. Goes together. Art also? Okay. Those things go together. Related arts is very important. In my case, golly, if it hadn't been for athletics, I don't know how I would have been excited about college. But that got me there. And I was a good student. Not a great student, but a good student. And I have a young girl I coach that's from the country of Sierra Leone. She and her twin sister were adopted in a refugee camp. She taught herself how to draw. And that has been so healing. She's got lots of different problems. Her mother encouraged me to share this story. Because she had these problems growing up. The twin girls, the mother already had 10 other children. She and her twin sister were put in a refugee camp. And Hope had borderline personality, Asperger's, autism. Well, you know, if you just look at that, you think, well, what are we going to do with this child? Well, nothing was happening there, and this family found out about her, and her sister adopted them. And so the art has been huge in her life. She's going to have an art show later this summer. She finds pictures and looks at them and says, I think I can draw that. And when she's finished, you can't really even tell what the difference is. It's so good. So art and music and band, all of that with physical education, it all fits together. Well, there's a symmetry to it we need in our schools. So I think that's a bad model when they have to choose. Oh, you can only be in band. If you're in band, you can't be in physical education. Why not be in both?
Ours was every other day when I was in high school. You went to gym one day and then art the next day, and then it would just switch each time.
And by the end of the week, it all balanced out. Yeah, good. Well, it's important. So I'm glad that we had some related arts people here, because those things should never be competing with each other. It should all fit together extremely well, like a puzzle. Important. So I put a title up there, Help Us Save Current and Future Generations of Children Through Systematic Physical Education. Now, let's say that an administrator, I would think this shouldn't happen. They would just say, okay, you're in charge of physical education, good luck. Well, that person with no preparation is going to be left to rolling out soccer balls and rolling out basketballs without the preparation. It's got to be the right person in the right job with the right preparation so that it can be taught well. Because it's not just to create kids that are talented on sports teams. It could be. But think about this, if any of you have children that are, do you have any children that are student athletes? Okay. Well, if I had some, I'd like to think they'd have been wanted to be involved. Kind of have a lot because of all different kids that I'd coached. But the understanding of those sports comes from physical education. That laundry list we had of all those pieces, that's where they learn it. And if they don't learn it in elementary physical education, middle school, there is no chance they will make a team, ever. And it's not possible. And so I know what athletics did for me, and that understanding physical education helped me to be able to do those things. So, like so many things, we don't want to play catch up, trying to get the right things taught at the right times to set up children for success. Now, based on some of the things we talked about, does anybody have any questions or anything you'd like to dig into a little deeper?
I had a question, just real quick. I wanted to ask you what was muscle tension? What was that? Is that just like when you squeeze your legs or something?
I'm so glad you asked.
I was just curious,
Tennessee Physical Education Standards, K through 12. Let me find it. Muscle tension. We're going to come back to that question. Okay, we'll get to it. Anybody else have any questions? And then I'll ask you a question.
The only thing that I see that I struggle with, because I'm a high school PE teacher, this is not necessarily a question, but I guess it's just more of a comment, but they're not getting the basic building blocks from the elementary level and the middle school level that they need to whenever they do come to me. I'm having to you go back to like the middle school level of teaching those things instead of I should be able to be using what they already have learned and then adding it to a more complicated or a more rigorous activity in my class. And that's been my biggest issue since I've been teaching, was they just don't have those basic building blocks of even knowing how to kick a ball or even like catch a ball or throw a ball properly. I mean, they're going in and they're stepping with the same foot and throwing, or they don't know what foot they kick with, or stuff like that. So that's always been my issue, is I can't build much because I'm having to start at the most basic level, unfortunately. But that's more of in our system that has to be addressed at the lower levels, unfortunately.
And there's lots of pieces to that too. If physical education's taught the way it's supposed to be, then these things are in place. Now, if the teacher does it that way, awesome. They may or may not. You're on the receiving end of not. Yeah. And it applies also in my sport. As a high school coach, you get excited about who's coming from middle school. Awesome. And then they get there, this one boy came from another school, he's 6'3". This is going to be fun. I'm thinking, it's going to be fun. So I said to him, hey, I'm just curious, what are in the shot, the middle school boys show an 8-pound shot. What did your middle school coach, what were some of the things they told you to do with a shot? And I was interested in, all of the biomechanics that this young boy was coming in with. I was getting giddy. And he goes, well, he basically told me to just chuck it as far as I could. Okay. So I understand what you're talking about. So I had to start out at if I had to put him by grade level, he'd have been with the 5th graders, because at our school they were learning that as 5th graders. They know how to do that. And what's neat too is even in kindergarten through grade 3 or 4, it's 5, kindergarten through 5, track and field camp in the summer, you can teach those little guys how to do that. How to put the hips ahead of the upper body, and they can do it. It's really special. Any other questions? And then I wanted to ask you if you're interested in hearing any about the legislation we've worked on. You may or may not be, but there's all kinds of things to talk about. And you're back to your question. our dream is that your administrator calls you in and says, what do you need?
Yeah.
What are you missing? Yeah. And you can explain, well, could these things be not forced upon the elementary and the middle school physical educators, but why are they not taught? Is it that there's all the kids are transferring in every year, or because it could be?
I think you said. I think you kind of answered it when you said a lot of PE teachers are more game oriented and just wanting to play a game of some sort, you know. And I think, of course, that's fun for the kids, but it's not teaching them for later on, like something that they could be really good at if they were to learn, you know, some of the basic things. But yeah, I haven't had a PE professional development like this, so that's why I like this a lot.
Okay, good.
Because we don't have them very much.
Well, it gets you fired up, because any of you can end up. Yeah, you're welcome. Any of you could end up on search committees, where then you can say, hey, can this caliber of teacher be hired? And if not, why not?